Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Fridays with Vistage webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some items to help you participate in today's webinar. If you are experiencing technical difficulties joining the webinar session, please dial support at 1-888-259-8414. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join either by phone call or computer audio. If for any reason you'd like to change your selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in your control panel. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. Please note that a PDF of today's presentation is available for download on your control panel, and a recording of this presentation will be sent to attendees via email within the next week. And now I'd like to introduce the moderator for today's webinar, Ann Petrick. Ann?
Thank you so much. As Director of Research for Vistage, I'd like to welcome you to 3 strategies to win the war for talent. If issues related to talent growth or hiring are causing you to lose sleep, you are not alone. Data shows that about 87% of CEOs list talent as their top challenge. Although most, 72%, plan to increase hiring, expect fierce competition. The National Center for the Middle Market reports that 44% cannot find candidates with the skills they need, and 4 in 10 say this limits their growth. The webinar today will explore the latest trends and offer advice on how to make talent a strategic focus. You'll learn how to create a culture by design versus default, treat recruitment as a sales process, and get more strategic in HR. Today's presenter is Kathleen Quinn Votaw, CEO of TalenTrust. Kathleen has decades of earning accolades in the staffing industry. However, she determined that traditional models don't always serve the best interests of clients. She vowed to disrupt the stagnant staffing and recruiting industry. So in 2003, Kathleen launched TalenTrust to help companies find, keep, and grow the best people. Her firm's expert team collaborates closely with executives to identify the root causes and often interrelated issues behind companies' human capital challenges. Kathleen is both a speaker and author of the book titled Solve the People Puzzle: How High-Growth Companies Attract and Retain Top Talent. And as a longtime Vistage member, Kathleen attributes much of her firm's growth to participation in the Vistage community. Thanks so much for being with us, Kathleen, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ann. I'm very excited to be here this Friday. It's a short week, but we can all focus on winning this war on talent together on this September 7th. I love Fridays with Vistage, and I appreciate Ann's introduction. I'm going to talk a little bit on webcam about what we're going to talk about today. It's those 3 strategies, and I'm going to get very specific about things you can do in your company. I also want you to understand that we're going to outline why and how HR needs to be strategic in your organizations. And then I'm going to focus on culture, recruitment, and engagement. So we have a lot to cover. I'm going to go off webcam so you can focus on the content, not me. And then I'll come back in toward the end of the content and wrap it up and hand it right back to Ann. So get ready, get your pens and pencils out, and get ready to have an active webinar today. So when we talk about culture and we talk about recruitment and engagement, we have to talk about the value of people. You know, many people, as Ann cited in her introduction, and thank you again, Ann, are looking to hire this year. Talent's topping the major decisions that CEOs are making. About 87% of CEOs surveyed in multiple venues, multiple areas, are really saying it's their #1 issue. And it needs to move into a strategic function in your organization because the labor market is so tight. And then that's coupled with expectations for increased hiring, not to mention the people who might be planning to look for another job in your organization. So Ann, in her introduction, also mentioned the National Center of Middle Market, and we do a lot of work with them too. They put out a report this year called Help Wanted, How to Find and Develop the Talent You Need to Grow. It is available on our website under resources, and I recommend that as an additional point of reference, in addition to Vistage and TalenTrust, that you pull that report down from our TalentTrust.com website to get more tools on how to attack things like recruitment, training, and how to become mighty even though you might be a middle market company. So 4 in 10 middle market companies say growth is restricting their growth because of lack of talent, and 44% cannot find candidates, which means revenues are constrained, gross margins are constrained, and profits are constrained. As an 11-year Vistage member, I don't want any of you to be constrained. I want you to continue to grow and thrive, and getting the right people in the right seats and building those resources is key to your growth. With unemployment at the lowest point in 18 years, it's really a great time for employees, but guess what? It's not a great time for employers from an employment perspective. We're all fighting for the same inventory. Many leaders know this. They know this intellectually, but they're still not taking action. I can't tell you exactly why, but for some reason they put attracting, retaining, and finding people at a lower priority on their list. We want to give you some tools to put that at the top of the priority list, because this is at the top of the concerns, but how you can actually attack this. I did some additional stats to consider as I set the stage for our conversation. 44% of leaders in the recruitment industry study believe that people might become largely irrelevant in the future of work. However, another leading industry company, recruitment industry company, shows that human capital actually has more than 2 times the value of tangible assets, which is a potential value in the trillions. So it really is a very hard asset and something we have to focus on as we grow our companies. First, a little point about winning the war on talent and making our human capital, human resources organizations much more strategic. We have been mean to our HR leaders for a long time. Many of you on this call probably remember articles from Fast Company saying why we hate HR, and recently from Harvard Business Review why we should blow up HR. Well, we suggest at TalenTrust that we should stop being mean to HR and integrate them into the strategy of their company. Educate them about what profit and loss means and how human capital can affect those stats. Align them with the company objectives and give them business goals that align with the outcomes you want. It's time to give them a true seat at the table, not just a token seat at the table, and they can help you really become strategic by choosing the right business partners, by putting the right team together, by being strategic about these issues so you can win the war for talent. By putting your people first, you will really impact your business in several different ways. You're going to cultivate an intentional culture, which many of your companies have a culture that is formed by your employees, but you're not developing it by design. You still need to take action on driving your culture intentionally. And we have a Fridays with Vistage webinar entitled Culture by Design, Not Default. I invite you to download that and really focus specifically on culture. You'll also promote an accurate and compelling employment brand. We find that many companies have an exceptional corporate brand that is focused on the customers they want to buy from them, but they have no employment brand whatsoever, especially in middle market. Nobody knows who they are and nobody can find them. But by putting your people first and putting strategy in place, you will have that employment brand, which is the voice of the employee and how people can experience you. You'll also develop a pipeline of qualified candidates. So you're not in crisis mode continuously when somebody exits your organization. I was talking to a customer the other day as we were sitting down to lunch, and lo and behold, another key employee was recruited away, and he just had a resignation before we sat down to lunch. So if he had a pipeline in place, or if you had a pipeline in place, he does because he has treated this as a strategy with TalenTrust as his partner, then he wouldn't worry so much about what kind of productivity he'd be losing in his company by not having that pipeline. You'd also establish an effective hiring process. Hiring processes need to be strategic, well-defined, effective, and consistent. Think of yourself and how much time you prepare for an interview before you actually sit down with a prospective candidate. Now, come on, be honest. Write down how much time you actually review the resume, review any supporting documentation. I bet most of you wrote down 5 to 10 minutes. Yet, unfortunately, this is a $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 hiring decision, and you're given it 5 to 10 minutes of preparation. We find that many companies don't have effective hiring processes because they haven't trained their hiring managers in the hiring process. So that's a really important place to build strategy around. Then put some investment in onboarding. Think of all the time, energy, and effort you have put into getting somebody to even apply for your company, let alone interview with your company. Once they get there, just don't give them a phone and a cube and a computer and say good luck. Effective onboarding should really be a well thought out 6-month assimilation plan into your company, your cultures. What are the unwritten rules? How do things work here? How do people get rewarded? How do people behave? Not a week-long orientation plan. Last 2 points. You'll boost engagement with training and recognition and growth opportunities, and I'll touch on recognition a little bit later. It's one of the easiest things that we as leaders can give and forget to do. And then continually innovate by making sure that your people are motivated by your culture and elevate their achievements. So there's many, many great outcomes by putting your people first, and we're going to talk more about how to put some things in place that can help you achieve these great outcomes. So my friend Joe Galvin, who works with Ann, who's our moderator today, he runs Vistage Research, and he has shared with us and said that we could use this to educate all of you as well, the top 5 strategies to win the war for talent in an Inc. article. The first one that he talks about is recognize that talent precedes growth. Second, retain while you recruit. The Zillow's founder says we're in the business of re-recruiting our people every day, and retention is just as important as recruitment. Engage and develop your employees. Offer better wages. I just wrote a blog on Don't Be Cheap. It's also available on my website, and we just had a briefing on that, I think yesterday. You have to be informed as to what your competitors are willing to pay for great talent out there, and pay it. Because if you don't, you won't get the best and brightest. And last, compete on the basis of benefits. Joe surmises that retention is surpassing recruitment, and it has become a business imperative, especially based on the unemployment rate. You must retain while you recruit because 3 in 4 of employees are open to or actively seeking new employment. Now let me say that again. 3 in 4 of your employees are actively seeking or open to new opportunities. So it's a double-edged sword. Churn in the workforce is a sign of economic confidence and allows you to attract new team members. But while you're welcoming new folks in through the front door, much of your current workforce might be leaving or be lured away out the back door. So many of you know how many positions you want to hire for right now. Who else is looking in your company? Where else do you have to develop the pipeline I talked about on the last slide? And Joe has also emphasized that culture is foundational to these 5 strategies. And I'm going to spend a lot of time on culture today because we believe that culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and is absolutely foundational to anything I'm going to tell you today. So with that, culture really is something you need to design, not just let it happen to you. Now, we all have cultures, but sometimes we don't steer our culture or define our culture or align our culture because we don't know what to do with it. Develop a workplace by design, and then enhance and promote your employment brand. They go hand in hand. So you're the employer of choice, and people know how you are and know how to find you. What do employees think about your company culture? Reflect on that for a minute. It's important to current and prospective employees because nearly half of job seekers, 50%, cite culture as very important in applying to a company. And this is an alarming stat, but 32% are willing to take 10% less in compensation for a better culture. And culture is your environment, how people experience you, your culture, your attitudes, your beliefs, your traditions. And I'm going to state this again, 32% are willing to take less pay in order to work for a great culture. So hopefully you're writing down, what are we doing about our culture? Where is our culture? 1 in 3 will also take lower salary in exchange for a better culture. However, culture became sexy in 2015, but nobody really knows what to do with it. It's kind of like air. This is a quote from a Columbia Business School professor. We discovered that culture is almost like air. It's everywhere, but it's invisible because people don't really know what to do with it. They don't have a systematic approach to culture. I'm going to unpack for you 3 different ways that you can actually measure where your culture is today, because that's where you have to start. And if you're like me and a Vistage member, you want to make sure that you have step number 1. So I'm a big proponent of step number 1. One of the Vistage chairs in Chicago said, always give Vistage members step number 1. So today you're going to get a couple different choices so you can choose how do you define where your culture is so you can actually impact it. Culture in a national survey also indicated, again from Columbia, that 90% of executives say that culture was important to their firms. Yet, 78% said culture is among the top 5 things that make their company valuable. 50% say that corporate culture influences productivity, creativity, profitability, etc. Yet only 15% say that their corporate culture is exactly where they need it to be. Isn't that alarming? Are you one of the 15%? Do you know where your corporate culture is? And 92% say that improving it would be valuable and increase the value of their company. Now, I'm not saying culture work is not hard. It doesn't just happen to you. You don't just show up after a Vistage meeting or a Vistage webinar and say, I'm going to do culture today. It's hard work, it's a process, and building a strong culture is just not easy. It's an every day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year job. Once you start looking at it, you've got to continuously work on it. It's more than a buzzword, and it's a real must-have for setting the stage for winning this war for talent. We're in a highly competitive environment right now. There's just not the inventory. So having a culture by design will help you distinguish yourself in the marketplace. Every company has its own unique culture, and it is, again, the sum of the values, traditions, attitudes, beliefs, interactions, behaviors that come from the company. So how does culture impact your employees, and why should culture be part of your future planning? Most business leaders agree that marketing sets the table for sales. Similarly, I argue that culture sets the table for a successful recruitment and retention program and process. If you have high turnover in your ranks, it's likely a symptom of cultural issues. And if you have positions that remain open, it's likely that you have a limited pool of qualified candidates. It's all a symptom of the cultural issues and a weak or non-existent employment brand. Bersin is a division of Deloitte, And they support the work that we do in the marketplace by suggesting that you need to become simply irresistible. Anybody remember that song from the 80s? I'm sure it's going off in your head right now. You got to create an environment that promotes meaningful work, not just busy work. Jobs must give people the autonomy to be creative and be able to perform well. Great management. The number one reason people leave organizations is their manager. So how are your managers performing with your most valuable asset, your people? How are they actually impacting your culture and the attitudes and beliefs? Then creating a fantastic environment, which can mean having an interesting workspace, giving people better benefits, more fringe benefits, letting people work from home. I was talking to somebody from a large Fortune 500 company the other day, and 1 day a week, everybody gets to work from home, regardless of their position. Growth opportunities. People want to grow, especially the emerging generations. They want to be developed. They really want to grow, and they want to learn how to get the best out of the organization and themselves. And then most important is trust and leadership. Most companies expect people to work hard. It's really important that you're transparent and honest with your employees. Does your company have a mission that your employees can relate to? Do your leaders trust employees to make the right decisions? Do your employees trust you that you are leading them in the right direction? As entrepreneurs, we lead people into uncertainty every single day. And that trust and that leadership is absolutely essential to your success and in building a great culture. So why would people want to work at your company? Have you asked that of your employees lately? And not just casually, but really formally asked, why would you want to work for your company? And I'd add to that, why would people want to work for you the person? Just like Simon Sinek says, start with why. I'm sure being good Vistage members, you all know about Simon Sinek. He was very popular for a couple of years. But I truly believe in his message. Why do people work for you and your company? Especially when there's a ton, and I mean a ton of choices out there. What's your company value proposition to current and prospective employees? Just as you have a customer value proposition, you need to also consider your employee value proposition. And again, why would people want to work at your company? So take that as one key takeaway from this webinar and go back and explore that with your other managers, if you're a senior leader, with your employees, if you're a hiring manager, and that's a good place for you to start. So how are you going to do this? It's a lot of work. In one of my Vistage member presentations, somebody asked me, and often does, well, how the heck are we going to do all this? This is a lot of work. So I promised you a few tools. There's a couple things you can do. Employees' expectations around culture are very wide and deep. They're focused on purpose, leadership, growth, feedback, work-life balance, wellness and well-being, all kinds of things. They're also focused on engagement. So I'm going to give you a couple tools that you can work with and choose only one of these to work with in your organization to set the stage as to where your culture is today so you can start building it by design. It's important that these tools be used confidentially and anonymously so you can get the best results from your employees. So you really can benchmark where your culture is today and then begin to improve upon it. Some really important cautionary statements before you dive into this. Doing this confidentially is very key. You might want to engage an outside third party, and you have to be prepared to listen and react. Listen and react to your employees. Employees are going to expect transparency. And then third, use the tools with current employees in exit interviews and really understand what top performers think of the culture. So tool number one, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, it's the Q12 from GALLUP. And GALLUP tested thousands of questions on millions of employees to find the right questions with the exact wording, and the exact wording is important, that provided the highest correlation to business results most companies regularly measure: profitability, productivity, turnover, and safety. And these are the 12 questions that GALLUP suggests you should know about every employee that works for you in your company. I want to point out two key questions and just talk about them a little bit. Number 4, in the last week, have you received recognition or praise for your contributions? Now, it almost is no cost, or at minimum low cost, to give people recognition and praise in their position. Yet we forget to do it because we're busy. And so don't get down on yourself that you forget to do it. Figure out a process or a system where you can remember to give recognition and praise. I suggest, if you have your smartphone next to you right now, or if you're on your computer, put a recurring appointment on your weekly, every week, to remember to give recognition or praise to somebody who's worthy of that in your environment every week. Now, most of you are probably hiring managers, business owners, HR leaders. You know, I don't have visibility into who's on the call, but I'm your Vistage members, so you're people leading organizations. And wouldn't it be great that if you put a process into place that you could actually think just for 2 minutes on the car ride in, who this week distinguished themselves and who can I give praise to? Some key things: make sure it's authentic. An easy thing like writing a note to their home is a great way to show some recognition. Sending an email is a great way to give recognition. Give recognition in a meeting to someone who's done something that is notable. Make sure it's authentic, though. Don't make it up. And if there's nobody to recognize that week, there's nobody to recognize that week. Move on. But at least you've put a system in place that you're not going to forget because you're busy or you're worried about gross margin or profitability. And if you send a note home, you get a double effect. You recognize the employee, but then the family actually sees the note too. So I really like personal notes at home. It's an easy thing for you to do, and you can start doing it on Monday or even today before you leave the office. The second question I want to point out to you is number 11. In the last 6 months, has your manager talked to you about, got tongue-tied. Number 11, in the last 6 months, has your manager talked to you about your progress? Again, remember I said the number one reason people leave organizations is their managers. Sometimes the managers forget to talk to their employees about their progress and where they're going and what they need and where they want to be in the next 6 months. This is something, again, that is no cost. Maybe it's low cost, maybe it's over a lunch, but it's really not a huge investment for your company. It's something that doesn't get done. So train your managers to talk about the progress of their employees and see where people want to go. Do they want to progress? Don't they want to progress? What's in it for them? Why are they attached to your culture? What keeps them up at night? What do they worry about the company? And where do they want to go? Are they in marketing and they want to aspire to be in sales? Are they in operations and they aspire to be in, to design something, a new product? Your managers need to have the pulse on their employees and know where they want to go at every moment. So do your managers know about their employees? The next tool I want to share with you is the Net Promoter Score. Everybody knows about the Net Promoter Score from Harvard Business Review, I believe, as a best practice. But if you don't, I'll explain it to you a little bit. This is another great tool that you can use with internal to your company. Again, confidentiality is absolute key, and I suggest you use an outside third party to gather this information. The number one question to ask is how likely is it that you would recommend our company, product, service to a friend or colleague? How we change it at TalenTrust into the Net Promoter Score, Employee Net Promoter Score, is asking how likely is it that you would recommend employment at our company to a friend or colleague? And then you follow it up with what's your reason for this ranking? The Net Promoter Score measures loyalty. It helps you understand the willingness of your internal customers, your employees, to recommend employment at your organization to their peers. This one question is a proxy for gauging their overall satisfaction and loyalty to their employer. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a business owner. I want more promoters and passives than I want detractors. So it's powerful to understand who the number of detractors you have in your organization and work toward helping them become more passive or promoters, or encourage them to find another position, because you really don't want people working in your environment that are detractors from the brand that you're trying to support, grow, and promote. And lastly, Tiny Pulse, I threw in there for you. We love Tiny Pulse. Tiny Pulse is a great organization, and it's a great tool. You can Google this at www.tinypulse.com. There's also a landing page that I can send out and follow up to this webinar, where you can say you heard about them from TalenTrust, if you don't mind using our name, if you do engage with them. Tiny Pulse is an engagement software, and it's more than engagement. It asks these questions on a weekly basis or monthly basis so you can have a pulse on your culture. It also has a program for recognition. It builds recognition and peer-to-peer recognition into their program. It also has a suggestion box, and it also benchmarks all the data against your industry. So many times I get questions from our clients, well, what are my competitors doing? Tiny Pulse has this built into their tool, and we, full disclosure, do have a business relationship with Tiny Pulse because we love their tool. TalenTrust also loves their tool as well. So last couple of points on culture, and then I'm going to dive into recruitment. Everything I've just covered with you will help you promote your culture. The first step is understanding where your culture is. The second step is enhancing where the gaps are, what can be improved, and then leveraging it. Leveraging that information to build a culture by design, not by default. Once you become purposeful about culture, you can begin to leverage your organization's unique culture in your employment brand to retain your employees who are currently there and help you differentiate it from other employers and ultimately attract and retain. Again, retention is number one, your workforce. So it determines what makes you so special. And I know because you're already Vistage members, you're already leading because you're curious cats. You're already winning because you're part of Vistage. If you spend some time on culture, you'll win even more. Let's jump into recruitment. Excuse me, I just had to have a little sip of water. Because you want to find people who can fill your open positions and, unfortunately, maybe replace some of those people who might be open to or actively engaged in looking for another job. So we suggest you establish a very strategic, proactive recruitment process. Many of you are currently posting and praying. You post a position to some job board and you pray somebody's going to show up. Unfortunately, that's only going to attract 30% of the population. Our methodology that I'm going to share with you here today, recruitment as a sales process, allows you to open up the conversation to the 70% of the population that's never going to post to an ad. And that's who you really want to start talking to. You don't want to talk to the people who are constantly trolling for jobs. This is the number one issue among executives in the country. And our Vistage community is roughly around 22,000 members. It's the number one issue according to our research department of Vistage members. but well beyond Vistage members, it's a huge problem. And people think that posting and praying is going to take care of it. It's not. So recruitment is a sales process, and it's 5 distinct steps. The first one is lead generation. Well, the first one is actually building a great culture. So, you can kind of almost superimpose building a great culture on this graphic and having an employment brand. Then once you have an employment brand, you can actually move to lead generation and start pulling people in through all different kinds of sources. Then once you do that, you engage these candidates in an active dialogue of who you are, what you do, what you stand for. Remember, I talked about Simon Sinek? Why you do what you do attracts candidates as much as it does clients. And then that candidate screening and assessment. We find clients and companies fall down here all the time because they don't have a well-defined process on how to actually screen people. And then they don't use assessments. There's so many wonderful assessments out there that can give you great data to ascertain whether somebody will fit in your culture and actually be able to do the job that you're hiring them for. I suggest you look at some of these assessments. There's a great one called Predictive Index, another one called Preview, another one called Profiles International. And I don't know why they all begin with P's, but they do. It was not on purpose that I did that. Culture Index is another great tool. The Hogan Assessment is a great tool. There is for everything on this earth, there's an assessment. So you can have your HR organization look into assessments. We also help companies identify what assessment is best for them, but use something so your hiring managers can get better at screening the people. Then how to conduct an interview. How do you conduct an interview with the best few? And again, this is where the system tends to break down with many of our clients. They just don't know how to conduct an interview. So if there's one other key takeaway, make sure you train them on how to have that critical decision. And then the final interview. In this really tough market, what are you going to offer somebody that's going to compel them to come work for you? Be educated, please. One of our clients in Boston was uneducated about the compensation and really wouldn't adapt to what the market conditions were for that particular position, and obviously, unfortunately, couldn't hire the right people because they had a whole different compensation model than the market was allowing for in that key position. So make sure you're educated and don't just make assumptions. So we're at 11:40, so I'm going to jump to I'm going to jump through a few slides, but wanted you to really get the essence of recruitment as a sales process. The steps are building that employment brand based on your culture, then going through lead generation, candidate engagement, candidate screening, client interviews, and final offer. And remember, to get somebody passively to talk to you, you're going to have to go through a lot of touches to get them to engage and actually have a conversation. And yes, if you're wondering, this is really hard work, it is hard work. And if you're wondering who's going to do this, either dedicate some resources internally in your company to do this, or hire a third party to do it for you. So I'm going to jump a little bit into the next subject matter, and it's the candidate experience. The candidate experience is really important, and it starts happening from the minute they engage with you. They can see you everywhere. We live in a society where nothing's a secret, and everything's a picture. There's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's Twitter. Everybody's a tweet right now. You have to make sure you establish an incredible candidate experience because all good candidates have about 3 job offers right now. Let me restate that. All great candidates have about 3 job offers right now. Let me start with what makes a bad candidate experience and write these down. Unclear application instructions, long applications, no real job description that tells them what they're going to be doing every day, no confirmation in email or phone, no notice when the position is filled, and unable to contact anybody in the company about their status. Now, for me, these things are really clear. It's a matter of respect. And this is what makes a bad candidate experience. They're all based on respect. Somebody's time, how people want to communicate, etc. Conversely, what makes a good candidate experience? Lots of communication, constant communication, notifications, timeline of the hiring process, human contact. There's a lot of talk right now about artificial intelligence. Well, guess what? You're not going to take the people experience out of hiring. It's just not going to happen. So human contact, and I don't mean sending an email or a text. I mean having a conversation with somebody, at minimum via phone, or let's just get crazy and think about video. There's all kinds of video technology now, or God forbid in person. So we'll make sure there's some human contact, and then really being timely and considerate of that person. So candidate experience is key. How you interact with these candidates from the first touch to the final offer and their first 6 months is gonna matter. So define how you want people to experience your organization. So key outcomes for strategic recruiting, just high-level summary. You're going to have a pipeline when somebody quits. Yay! You're going to engage passive candidates. You're going to become experienced candidate choice. You're going to boost awareness of your company. You're going to have competitive edge, and ultimately grow your bottom line. Bersin, who we refer to a lot, which is a great organization that was established through Deloitte and Touche, they have put together this talent acquisition maturity benchmark. So just take a second. Level 1 is reactive tactical. People are order takers. It's helter-skelter. You have no process. Nobody knows what the definition is of hiring in your company. You have no real standards to adhere to. If you like them and they look good and they smell good, you hire them. That's level 1. Level 2, some standardization in the operational recruiting, some processes, some technologies, some hiring managers work with recruiters, others don't. They can do their own thing. There's not really a structure involved. Level 3, it's integrated. Talent acquisition is fully integrated with HR. They do all the sourcing, engagement, recruiting, etc. They do everything but the hiring decision. And then fully optimizes level 4, which is nirvana. Talent acquisition has a seat at the table. They are focused on forecasting and having you knowledgeable of what's going to happen to the organization, what the market factors will bear, etc. So take a minute, write down on your piece of paper in front of you, where's your company? Just gut reaction. Engagement is really important, and I want to focus just a little bit on that. If your employees aren't engaged, and unfortunately in this environment, we have very little engagement in employees with companies. I think we're about 30% of employee engagement, and unfortunately that's just too low. It's way too low. So I want you to think about measuring the engagement of your employees by ensuring that you have tools like a Tiny Pulse to make sure that you can measure where they are weekly or monthly, because things happen very quickly. If you get think of all the things that affect engagement. A new customer is one. A customer is lost. A new colleague comes into the work environment. A new boss comes into the work environment. A new owner comes into the company. Engagement is a very delicate thing, and we have to constantly be checking in with our people to ensure that they're engaged in the work that they're doing, and they're really focused on the company mission. So people quit. I've been saying this the whole most of the webinar today. Most reason why people quit is an unlikable boss. The second reason is a lack of empowerment. Third is internal politics. and a lack of recognition. So figure out what your hiring managers are doing with their employees. Make sure they're well trained. Make sure they're empowered. Make sure there's no politics. And make sure you're giving that recognition I talked to you about when we reviewed the GALLUP 12. And more importantly, why do people stay? Why are people going to stay with you and choose you every day? Because if you don't realize that they have choice, they do. And every single one of them who are good to very good to excellent in your company are being recruited right now. And so they stay for a sense of purpose, clearly defined goals, responsibility, autonomy, flexibility, attention. Pay attention to your people. Opportunity for innovation, open-mindedness, transparency, and proper compensation. So I'm going to hand it back to my friend Ann in a second, but I just wanted to invite you all to continue the conversation with TalenTrust and with me. I've listed for you a couple different ways to continue to engage with this information. If you're with me right now, text the word Vistage on your phone to 72000. Again, take out your phone and text the word Vistage to 72000, and we'll follow up with this deck, some tools I mentioned throughout the webinar, and there's a plethora of information on our website that you can engage with and start this on your own. I'm a Vistage member too, and my goal is to grow great companies throughout the country. So I want all of the Vistage companies to thrive and attack this issue, and hopefully this has been helpful to you today. I'm going to pass this back to Ann because we have some questions, and I will go off video, but have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Ann, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kathleen. And, as you noted that 72% are planning to increase hiring, some of our questions actually pertain to recruitment. So I'm going to start with a question about how to attract a specific demographic, how to attract millennials to old manufacturing, for example, rubber processing, and keep them. But I really think the idea of attracting and retaining millennials is probably something that's top of mind for our members. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. Well, millennials are really kind of the emerging workforce, and Gen Zs are coming up right behind them, Ann. And, every industry has a story. So what's your story? It's not just a rubber processing plant. What do your products and services enable people to do? I mean, if you think about marketing sets the table for sales, what does the rubber that you process actually become involved in everyday life? Tell your story about the products that you help develop. That will excite the emerging generations to join you. Talk about the technology that you're using. I'm sure the technology that you're using is some of the latest and greatest technology that they could work with. So focus on things that excite them, the story of what you do with the product, your story as a business leader, and how you've built a career in this rubber industry, and how it could affect them in the manufacturing industry as a whole, not just the rubber industry. So it all ties into this culture and employment brand, and I would get your marketing people involved in this discussion with you.
Thank you, Kathleen. And I think, it's interesting you talk about what is your story. And I know there's a lot of conversation about purpose. What's the purpose of what you do? And so I think that ties really closely into the idea about culture and what your story is. Our next question is also in the architectural millwork trade, so specific industry that is experiencing labor shortage. So do some of the principles you shared here today apply to blue-collar talent?
It sure does, and we actually at TalenTrust work with the construction industry and architectural industry all over the country. And so it's about that pipeline I was talking about. People perceive you can't build a pipeline of blue-collar talent. and I'm here to tell you we have done it. And there's a lot of movement in hourly workers and blue-collar talent, there's less and less inventory of people who work with their hands, the tradesmen, the electricians, the plumbers, the restoration carpenters, the carpenters. And it's something that's near and dear to my house because my husband is a restoration carpenter, and he can make anything with his hands. He's amazing. And it's not a very well respected thing anymore in our culture. But Mike Rowe, who many of you in manufacturing and construction might know, he's been quoted to say that it's our jobs to make blue-collar jobs sexy again. And he's on a mission to do that. So I suggest you go to mikerowe.com for some tips and tricks, and also start building a pipeline of blue-collar talent. Invite them to your facility on a Friday or a Monday. Give them a tour of the facility. Find out what they're earning at their other job. You're in a hunt for people, and it's okay to know who's working in your 30-mile radius with people who might need blue-collar workers as well. There's a lot of movement there. Be the one who is leading the charge on building a great environment for them, and they will not leave. And also, not being cheap with the blue-collar workers is really important. $1 makes a big difference, and it's better than having to refill your jobs again and again and again, and having that disruption in your projects.
Excellent. So wages would be maybe a little more important to that group, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, Anne. They're more. Think about the last time anybody on this phone call made an hourly wage. Think about that for a minute, and where you were and what you were. When people make hourly wages, they're struggling with, do I put gas in the car? Do I get, hamburger for dinner? Or do I just get the bread and the cheese for dinner? I mean, it's a very different mindset. So take away their worries, and you will become an employer of choice.
I like that. Okay, and one last question on recruitment. Wanted to know your thoughts on recruiters and ZipRecruiter specifically.
Sure. So full disclosure before I answer this, I've been in the recruitment industry since 1985. So I love the industry that I'm in. It's a $100 billion industry. And you have to really understand how the industry is configured. There's a couple different kinds of ways people work in the recruitment industry. One is an executive search firm, which works mostly on the C-suite and VP level. The next level is a huge group. It's contingent placement firms. They make up about 80% of the $100 billion industry that is the recruitment industry. And then you have temporary staffing firms, contract staffing firms, and then you have all these, tools. Like ZipRecruiter isn't a recruiter; it's just a job board, quite frankly. So recruiters can be very effective in-house or outsourced. We work with many customers throughout the country as their strategic recruitment arm because this is a lot of work, and they want to be in the business of manufacturing, construction, technology. They don't want to build a whole nother business. So outsourcing to the right people can be a really good idea. ZipRecruiter is not a bad tool. It's not a great tool, and there's many tools out there. I caution you to think one thing's going to solve it. It's never one thing. It's many things that will help you solve your problems. So that's why when we work with our clients, we start with a gap analysis to diagnose what issues there might be. So we put emphasis on those things you really need to build up versus you don't. So if you're thinking about recruiters or ZipRecruiter, I invite you to schedule a consultation with me, and we can go deeper into that because I'd want to learn more about what you're trying to achieve to give you better counsel.
Okay, great. So you talk about other tools, and I'm just curious about something like Glassdoor, because if culture is so important, Glassdoor seems to be one of those tools where employees can actually rate their experience, and that can help or hurt you. What are your thoughts on Glassdoor and managing your reputation through something like that?
Glassdoor, a lot of companies have a love-hate relationship with Glassdoor. So that's a really wonderful question. And the average score for all companies that have a rating on Glassdoor is a 3 on a scale of 1 to 5. So the average rating is a 3 on a scale of 1 to 5. Glassdoor began as a portal for disgruntled employees to, really bash their employers confidentially. It's matured a little bit. Glassdoor has certainly matured as a tool because they've gotten some backlash from the business community. And there's a couple ways you can manage your brand online. So it's not just Glassdoor. You have to manage your brand online through social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, website, etc. And oh, by the way, Glassdoor. So you have to manage your brand. So if you have marketing people on your team, or the CEO, depending on the size of your company, or a very senior HR person, you should read those Glassdoor results, and you can respond to them as the company that they are, giving feedback about, much like we do Yelp or TripAdvisor or things of that sort. So own your page on Glassdoor. It doesn't cost you any money to do that. And if somebody is not representing your brand the way you want them to, you can actually respond to each post with a positive comment. You can put pictures of your company up there, etc. Key point with Glassdoor, don't let anybody hijack your brand. Your employment brand is your employment brand. And ask your employees who are engaged to go in there and not let anybody hijack their brand either, because they work there. And if they have pride in their company, they're gonna want to fight back.
I like that quote, don't let anyone hijack your brand. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we just have about a minute left. And so I wanted to remind everyone of some of our upcoming webinars that we will be hosting as part of our Fridays with Vistage series. Next up is October 12th, the benefits of exercise and injury prevention. So looking at that from both a personal point of view and what that's going to help your employees. Injury prevention is definitely helpful for keeping employees on the job. And then on October 19th, we have Lawsuit Proof Your Business and Personal Assets. So really looking at another diverse set of thought leadership coming from experts within the Vistage communities. And you can register at vistage.com/FVW. That's vistage.com, F as in Friday, V as in W as in with, and V as in Vistage. So those are some upcoming sessions we have. And Kathleen, I wanted to thank you for your time today and sharing your insights. Remind everyone that the handouts are attached to this and that you will receive and email the recording. And I want to thank our participants for being with us today and wish everyone a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for attending. Bye-bye.